Well, now that I've talked about the original Star Wars, I've got to talk about one of the greatest sequels of all time. The Empire Strikes Back. So The Empire Strikes Back is the second Star Wars movie in the order that they came out and is a direct sequel to A New Hope, the original Star Wars. And after the huge success of the original Star Wars, this sequel was inevitable. It was gonna happen because everybody wanted to see more Star Wars. And in 1980, that's exactly what we got. But this time around, George Lucas is not the director. He's still the writer. He's still the producer. He's still got like all the credits. You know, he's still in charge of this franchise. And in the director's chair, we've got Irving Kershner, and he does a really good job with this material. And with the hindsight of the prequels and the sequel trilogy, this proves to me that Star Wars is at its best when George Lucas is directly involved but not directing. It seems to me that George Lucas has really great ideas as far as storytelling and world building and a creativity to rival any director, but when he has accountability, when he has people to question him and feed off of and bounce ideas back and forth like Irving Kershner in this movie, you get something truly special that doesn't happen when you have unlimited creative control or no creative control and it's just the studio calling the shots. But anyway, let's get into Empire. So Empire opens up shortly after the Death Star's been destroyed. The rebels have been found out, right? The Empire know where the base on Yavin 4 is. So they had to flee, and Vader is pursuing Luke Skywalker with a vengeance. It's not particularly clear why, but you know, the obvious reason is you don't blow up the Death Star without some serious repercussions. So the rebels are on the run and they're hiding out in this ice world of Hoth that is just this wasteland. It's a wasteland of ice and snow and looks like Rochester in the middle of February. You know, that's not the best place to live. But anyway, Luke is out there doing his patrol and he gets wampa'd. I just use wampa as a verb. And he gets taken away to the Wampa's ice cave to be eaten. And I guess here's a good time to talk about the changes the special editions brought onto this movie. And honestly, I am 100% cool with almost every change in this movie. This is one of those instances where pretty much every choice George Lucas made was either a cosmetic choice that really doesn't change the content that much, or it actually adds to the drama and stakes of this movie. And what he did with the Wampa is a perfect example of that. In the original version, you get a little bit of the Wampa, but you don't see much of him. You get enough where you understand, like, oh, he's a presence in the cave, and that he's coming toward Luke, and his arm gets chopped off. But aside from that, you don't really get to see his face, and you have no idea what happened to his tauntaun. That's completely left ambiguous. But in the special editions, they put more of the Wampa in there. You see him eating the tauntaun, you see him roaring in pain when Luke chops off his arm. It's just really nice to see more of it because he's a really cool creature that we saw so little of, and what we did see of him wasn't that impressive, but this new suit or CGI or whatever it was is really good, and it's just nice to see more of him. But like I alluded to, Luke chops off his arm and Luke escapes, but now he's alone in the desolate wastelands of Hoth. He's about to die, and Obi-Wan comes to him in a vision, in like a Force ghost, which this is the first time we've ever actually seen a dead Jedi take somewhat of a physical form after death. But Ben tells him to go to the Dagobah system and learn from Yoda, the Jedi that instructed Obi-Wan, not Qui-Gon Jinn. I don't really know why Lucas went with Qui-Gon in the prequels, because Empire makes it pretty clear that Obi-Wan and Yoda had a master-apprentice relationship, so what the heck, Lucas? But before Luke can die completely from the cold, Han Solo comes in and saves Luke. Han comes riding in on his tauntaun and stuffs Luke inside of his tauntaun to keep him warm. But the next day the two of them get picked up just in time for the Empire to find out where they are, because Darth Vader's been sending probe droids and Han Solo encountered one and it self-destructed. So now the Empire's here and they're preparing for a ground assault, and now we get the big first act battle, which is the Battle for Hoth, and it's amazing. The Battle for Hoth is one of the coolest action sequences in Star Wars, and it's one of the surprisingly rare instances in Star Wars where they resort to trench warfare. It's really cool to see these rebels in the snow, and they've got their guns up, and they're in the trenches, and they're shooting at these giant mechanical walkers that are just indestructible. The armor's too strong for blasters, so Luke has to talk to his other pilots and tell them to go for the legs, and they have to tangle them up and take them down. And they find multiple creative ways to destroy these walkers, but ultimately they're just buying time because the Empire knows where they are, and there's no way that the rebels, the small group that they are going to fend off the entire force of the Empire. So while the battle is going on, Leia is coordinating an evacuation, and she's trying to get all these ships off the ground. While the walkers are coming in, they're tearing up a lot of rebels. A lot of rebels die in this battle, and it's when Vader himself lands on Hoth with his snowtroopers, which I always thought snowtroopers were such a cool design for stormtroopers. They don't have a nose or mouth, they just got these kind of hoods, and it's so clean and intimidating, and kind of reminds you of the KKK, which immediately, if you're going for bad guy iconography, that's a good place to borrow from. And while I am a little disappointed that we don't really get to see a lot of snowtroopers in Star Wars and really any of the other movies, I am glad that we got to see them here. So Han, Leia, Chewie, and 3PO get on the Falcon in a mad dash to escape, and they escape. They don't quite make it through the blockade of Star Destroyers, and that ship is marked because that's the ship that came in at the last second to help Luke blow up the Death Star. So obviously they want whoever is on that ship. So in order to avoid captivity, the Falcon goes into this asteroid field, and the bulk of the middle section of this movie is 2 stories. You have the crew on the Falcon basically trying to just flee the Empire with a busted hyperdrive, and they do that by flying into an asteroid field, hiding out inside of a big asteroid that turns out to just be a giant asteroid worm thing. And this segment is admittedly a lot more interesting than it has any right to, because the idea of just an extended chase scene through asteroids and stuff should be pretty boring. But like I said before with the giant worm, Lucas throws in a lot of creativity here, and John Williams' score in this sequence in particular just adds such a gravitas and an urgency and a sense of momentum to the fighting and the fleeing and the maneuvering, where you do find yourself invested. And since I am talking about John Williams, I should probably mention that he makes some new music for this movie, and he came up with a new theme for the Empire. You might have heard it. It's just a little ditty called The Imperial March, and it may be the best thing that John Williams has ever written. It's just so great. It's such a powerful villain theme, and it shows that the Empire is striking back hard against the rebels because they blew up their Death Star. The Empire is not going to take that lying down. They are pursuing these rebels, and the Empire, and Vader in particular, is much more of a threat here than he was in the original Star Wars. Here he has taken control of the Starfleet, and he is just executing admirals and captains that disobey him, and he is 100% asserting his power through fear and intimidation to keep his subordinates in line and run a tight ship. But while all that's going on, Luke actually goes to the Dagobah system to find Yoda, and he does. He finds Yoda, but Yoda spends most of the time just kind of trolling him and is like, are you really ready to become a Jedi? And I love Yoda in this movie. Yoda is so funny here, and he brings that kind of Rafiki, Mr. Miyagi kind of humor where he knows what he's doing and he's got a plan, and he's trying to get to the student in a way that they might not expect to, for one, test their patience, but also to test their ability to learn as a student and to learn humility. And Yoda pulls that off in spades, and he's puppeted and voiced by Frank Oz, who was about half of the Muppets, alongside Jim Henson. And he's just great at it. Yoda has so many quotable, memorable lines that I just can't list them all here. I wouldn't do it justice. But here we learn a lot more about the Force, the kind of powers that you can get when you unlock it, like seeing the past and the future and moving things with your mind. But also about the dark side and the temptation and the anger and aggression that you need to be aware of and avoid those things, because that's what happened to Vader, and you don't want to end up like Vader. And as Luke is going through this training, he really starts getting in touch with the Force. He gets a pretty cryptic vision in a cave about him decapitating Vader and Vader's face being Luke's face, and we don't really know what that's supposed to mean. It's kind of vague, but I guess for a first time watcher it means that Vader and Luke aren't that different, that Luke could end up like Vader if he's not careful, and there's some kind of destiny connecting the two, but we don't really know what yet. But after that, he does get a vision of the short-term future, and he sees Han and Leia in pain and being tortured, and he's like, oh my gosh, they're gonna die if I don't do something. I have to go. And Yoda and Obi-Wan, who comes in a proper Force ghost, it's no kind of mirage thing in the distance. No, he is there. He is a ghost on Dagobah telling Luke to stay. This is a big enough issue where he has become physical form, or at least glowy blue physical form, and he is on Yoda's side pleading with Luke to just stay. You're not ready. You need to be patient. You're not ready to confront Vader. If you do, you're gonna have to do it alone because I can't interfere. So please just finish your training. But Luke, being the stubborn, egotistical rebellion hero, he got quite the feather in his cap for blowing up the Death Star, and I think it really started to go to his head in this movie because he's so arrogant and he's so like, oh, I'm just gonna fly in there and I'm gonna kick some butt. I'm indestructible. I'm gonna win because I have the Force and I'm a Jedi. But the truth that we all know is that, yeah, Luke has potential and that he is unlocking these powers, but he doesn't know how to control it. He's not a fully trained Jedi. He doesn't have the mental stability to really defeat the Empire yet. But Luke goes anyway, and before I really get into the third act, which is the Cloud City and all that goes down, I need to talk about the one change that Lucas made to the original version that I just can't quite get behind. I was so close to really be like, okay, this is a good change, and for a time I was like, okay, this is actually not a bad change, but there's something about that rubs me the wrong way, and here it is. It's when Vader talks to the Emperor. This is the first time that we've seen the Emperor in Star Wars. They talked about him a little bit in the first movie as just kind of this figurehead of the Empire. We don't really know even that he's in touch with the Force or that he's a Sith Lord or anything. But Vader takes a knee and accepts a video hologram call from the Emperor, and it's here where we learn a few things. One, we learn that the Emperor is Vader's master, which implies that the Emperor knows the Force and that he's a Dark Lord and that he's over Vader. The second thing that we learn is that we finally see what he looks like. Now, in the original, he looks like this, which is admittedly a little goofy. They hadn't really settled on an official Palpatine design yet, so they kept the face pretty much in shadow. And watching these movies in continuity, it really doesn't match the Palpatine that we get in Return of the Jedi with Ian McDiarmid. So to rectify this, George Lucas filmed Ian McDiarmid in full Palpatine getup, delivering the speech so that, they could insert it here and that it would match pretty seamlessly, which is better for continuity, but there's a couple things wrong. For one, it's no longer mysterious. There's no shadow obscuring anything. You can see every detail practically of the Emperor's face. So when you see him in Return of the Jedi, it's not really a reveal because you know exactly what he looks like. But in the original, it's mostly kept in shadows, and even though you're looking at something, you're not quite sure what it is, but here every detail is on display, so it loses that mystery. The other thing I have wrong with this is that they changed the dialogue of this sequence. They not only brought in Ian McDiarmid to redo the dialogue, they also brought in James Earl Jones to redo his dialogue, where now Vader is clueless of Luke Skywalker's name, the Skywalker name, that he's the offspring of Anakin Skywalker, because in the prequels they made a big deal about keeping Luke and Leia's identity a secret from the Empire. So now to accommodate that, they made Vader not know who he was until the Emperor tells him, which kind of weakens Vader for me. In the original, Vader knows Luke Skywalker is Luke Skywalker, and he's kind of already put two and two together, and it also adds a deeper level to the intensity of which Vader is pursuing the rebels, and Luke in particular. It's not just out of revenge anymore for the Death Star. There is now a personal connection between Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi that Vader killed. So by retroactively making him not know who Luke was, it just kind of lessens that intensity, and I think it weakens the movie as a whole. And even though in the grand scheme of things it's a pretty small change, it is a change that I do think hurts the movie rather than helps it. But now let's talk about the Cloud City, because the Falcon lands in the Cloud City and they meet Lando Calrissian. And Lando Calrissian is a great character. It's a crime that they never really gave him more to do in these Star Wars movies, and especially in the sequel trilogy. That was a big disappointment because he is so likable. Billy D. Williams has such charm and charisma, and him and Harrison Ford really feel like old friends that are kind of estranged, that don't necessarily trust each other because they are both criminals and smugglers at the end of the day, so why would they really trust each other? But you can tell that they do kind of like each other, and that they've gone on adventures in the past together, and that they've shared the same ship. So that's just a treat until we find out that Lando's kind of been playing them this whole time because the Empire arrived right before they did, because Boba Fett tracked them. And yes, this is the introduction of Boba Fett, probably my favorite character in Star Wars until the Book of Boba Fett came out, and really didn't do that character any favors, and I'm still really upset about that. So now maybe Mando might be my favorite Star Wars character, because he is what Boba Fett should have been. But regardless, in this movie, Boba Fett doesn't really do or say much, but he is such a presence and he looks so cool. It's great armor. He's a bounty hunter. He's kind of what Greedo was in A New Hope, but more fleshed out and more vicious, and he's got more weapons on him. He's definitely packing. And now Vader basically has our heroes right where he wants them, and now he's torturing them just to give Luke a vision of their suffering so that he will come in to try to rescue him, which of course he does, but not before Han Solo gets frozen in carbonite as a test for Luke so that they can ship him to the Emperor for some re-education to the dark side without any muss or fuss. Encase him in some metal, thaw him out when he gets there, 2-day shipping. Seems like a good plan. So they test it out on Han Solo, and Han Solo does survive the experience, and you don't really know what the future holds for him because Boba Fett takes him away, to Jabba the Hutt, because Han still owes Jabba a lot of money. And of course, Boba's going to try to collect on the bounty on Han's head. So they're going off to Tatooine. Leia, Chewie, 3PO, and Lando are trying to find a way to get off this and just escape the Empire altogether, now that the hyperdrive has been fixed. But Luke is here now, and he's confronting Vader, and the lightsaber battle that ensues is in every way possible a step up from the lightsaber battle that we got in the last movie, where it's no longer just two guys smacking swords around. We got legitimate choreography because Luke's been training and Vader is testing him. He's just one hand blocking all the stuff that Luke's throwing at him, so you know that Vader is way more skilled than Luke is, and Luke is really going at it with two hands. He tries to do one hand, loses his lightsaber, he's got to go get it back. But to Luke's credit, he's not completely worthless in this fight. He is trying to use some of the skills and acrobatics and diversions and using the Force in ways that he trained with Yoda on in Dagobah. So you can tell that he has improved, but he's still just no match for Vader. Because about halfway through this fight, Vader rounds a corner and he is just hacking. He's breathing heavy. You can tell that Vader breathing is different. He's like really huffing and puffing, and he's just over it. He's two hands swinging now, and he's gonna cut something off, and he does. Luke loses his hand, and it's the hand that held his lightsaber too. So now he's been disarmed in pretty much every sense of the word now. But if that wasn't bad enough, Vader has forced him to retreat onto this antenna thing overlooking this seemingly bottomless pit where he has nowhere else to go, and now he doesn't have a weapon, and Vader's trying to get into his head. He's like, come on, just stop resisting, you've lost, just come over to the dark side, we're gonna treat you decent. But Luke of course resists because he's got the hero's heart and he's not gonna go to the dark side. So now Vader drops a bomb on him, and he asks him if Obi-Wan ever told him what happened to his father, and Luke says, he told me enough, he told me you killed him. To which Vader replies, no, I am your father. And this breaks Luke. Luke has already lost the fight. He's lost a hand. He's lost his lightsaber. He's retreated onto this bottomless pit. He's got nowhere else to go. And now he finds out that the person that he has hated since the beginning of this whole adventure, when he found out that Vader killed his father and has really used his training and everything to avenge his father and slay Vader, now he finds out that that person is his father. And all of a sudden he just can't hate Vader like he used to anymore. He's just so devastated. He looks down at the pit, he looks at Vader, and he drops. And he legitimately tried to kill himself. He didn't see any way out of this situation, and he thought that sacrificing his life was a much better ending than becoming a pawn of the Empire like Vader. But because this is a Star Wars movie and Luke has pretty thick plot armor, he goes in a tube and he ends up on the TV antenna at the bottom of the Cloud City, and he uses the Force to reach out to Obi-Wan because it's like, I need help, I need rescue, but Obi-Wan doesn't reply because again, Obi-Wan cannot interfere in this. Luke has to do this alone. So then he reaches out to the other person that he has a connection to, Leia, which kind of seems a little random that Leia actually hears him in the Force and that yes, she is Force sensitive, but that'll make more sense in the next movie. I'll talk more about it there. But anyway, Leia turns the ship around, picks up Luke, and now they go to reconvene with the Rebel fleet that really hasn't been in this movie much since the Battle of Hoth. They finally rendezvous with them, and that's the end of the movie. The movie ends right there. Everybody's on a low note. Nobody ends on a high note. Luke's whole world has been shattered by that one line, and he doesn't really know what to do with that information yet. The man that Leia loves is encased in metal and is now property of a gangster on Tatooine. And I used to think that at least the Empire ended on a high note, but that's not even true. I mean, there's a line that, got changed for the special edition, but it's in the original where he's just like, bring me my shuttle. So even Vader ends on a low note, and then the movie just ends. And we're like, where are we going to go from here? I mean, you have some ideas where you want it to go from here, and that'll all be played out in Return of the Jedi. But man, if ever there was an example of how to end your movie on a cliffhanger and hook your audience, it's Empire Strikes Back. And as for what I think about the movie as a whole, it's great. It's a great sequel. It does exactly what sequels should do. It explores more of the world. It explores more of the interpersonal conflicts among the characters. It splits up the characters so that they can all go on their separate adventures and have some personal growth. And from just a technical perspective, the special effects are a lot better here too. The sets are grander and cleaner. The choreography's better. The music is better. They got puppets and stop motion, and the stop motion actually holds up really well for stop motion that was made in 1980. Definitely heads and tails above the first Terminator and RoboCop in that department. Now I turn over to you guys. What do you think about The Empire Strikes Back? Is it your favorite Star Wars movie? I know a lot of people are looking more fondly upon the prequels, but I don't know. I think Empire is my favorite Star Wars movie. It's just everything that I would want in a Star Wars movie wrapped up in a neat little bow. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's a surprisingly balanced movie. But whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.